You know, before we dive into what might be the most important message you'll hear in your entire life, I need to ask you something. What time is it where you are right now? And where exactly are you watching this from? I'm asking because time, location, the very moment you clicked on this video. None of it is a coincidence. You see, the ancient Egyptians understood something profound about synchronicity, about divine timing, about how the universe orchestrates encounters between souls and knowledge at precisely the right moment. So wherever you are, whatever time it is in your corner of the world, you need to understand that you didn't randomly stumble upon this video. You didn't find this. This found you. And by the end of what I'm about to share, you'll understand exactly why the Egyptian code has been calling to you, possibly for lifetimes, and why right now, in this exact moment, you're ready to remember what your soul has always known. Let me start by asking you something that might shake the very foundation of everything you think you know about reality, about history, about who you are. Every single day you wake up, look in the mirror, go about your life, and you think you know yourself, right? You think you understand your purpose, your origin, your destination. But what if I told you that everything you've been taught about human consciousness, about ancient civilizations, about the capabilities of the human soul? What if all of it has been a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep you small, powerless, disconnected from the most extraordinary truth that has ever existed? You've been told that ancient Egypt was just another civilization that built some impressive pyramids, created some interesting hieroglyphs, worshipped some strange gods with animal heads, and then faded into history. But here's what they don't tell you. Here's what's been forbidden knowledge for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians weren't just building monuments. They weren't just creating art. They weren't just practicing religion. They were encoding the most advanced spiritual technology ever known to humanity. A technology so powerful that it could transform ordinary human beings into gods. And when I say gods, I don't mean in some metaphorical sense. I mean beings capable of transcending time, space, death itself. Beings who could navigate multiple dimensions, communicate across vast cosmic distances, manipulate matter with consciousness alone. The Egyptian code isn't mythology, it isn't superstition, it isn't ancient fantasy. It's an instruction manual for human ascension. And they HID it in plain sight for thousands of years, waiting for those who are ready to see it, waiting for you to be ready to see it. And the fact that you're here right now means something in you has awakened enough to receive this transmission. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds too incredible to be true, too fantastical, too removed from the rational world you've been conditioned to accept. But let me tell you something. That rational world, that materialistic worldview that's been hammered into your consciousness since childhood, that's the cage they built for you. That's the prison they constructed to keep your soul trapped, limited, controllable. Because here's the secret that the power structures of this world have known for millennia. When human beings awaken to their true nature, when they activate the Egyptian code within their consciousness, they become ungovernable. They become impossible to control, impossible to manipulate, impossible to keep in the endless cycles of fear, consumption, distraction, and spiritual amnesia that keep the current system functioning. Think about it. Why do you think throughout history, every time someone begins to awaken, every time someone starts to remember their divine nature, every time someone attempts to share these ancient mysteries with the masses, they're silenced, ridiculed, marginalized, or worse? It's not because they're crazy. It's not because they're delusional. It's because they're dangerous to a system that requires your unconsciousness to survive. The Egyptian priests, the true ones, the ones who held the real mysteries, Not the exoteric teachings they gave to the masses, but the esoteric wisdom they guarded in the inner temples. They knew that every human being carries within them the capacity for total enlightenment, complete liberation, godlike consciousness. And they encoded this knowledge into every aspect of their civilization, into the architecture, into the symbols, into the rituals, into the very geography of ancient Egypt itself, creating a massive multi-dimensional textbook that could only be read by those who had developed the eyes to see beyond the physical, beyond the obvious, beyond the lies. So what is the Egyptian code, and why does it matter to you, sitting wherever you are right now, living in the modern world, dealing with modern problems? Here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. The Egyptian code is essentially a map of human consciousness, a detailed blueprint showing you exactly how your consciousness operates, how it's structured, how it can be expanded, elevated, and ultimately liberated from the limitations of physical reality. You see, the ancient Egyptians understood something that modern science is only just beginning to glimpse. Consciousness is not produced by your brain. Consciousness is not a byproduct of neurons firing. Consciousness is not contained within your skull. Consciousness is the fundamental fabric of reality itself. It's the ground of all being, the source from which everything emerges, and your brain, your body, your physical form. These are just receiving devices, just antennae that allow infinite consciousness to have a localized experience in three-dimensional reality. The Egyptians called this infinite consciousness by many names: Atom, Ra, Harmonious Ra, the One, the All. But what they understood is that this infinite consciousness is not separate from you. It is you, the real you, the eternal you that exists beyond birth and death, beyond time and space, beyond all limitation. And the Egyptian code shows you step by step, level by level, initiation by initiation, how to remember this truth, how to embody this truth, how to become this truth while still operating in physical form. This is why the pyramids weren't tombs, despite what mainstream archaeology desperately wants you to believe. They were transformation chambers. They were consciousness amplifiers. They were technology far more advanced than anything we have today, because they worked not with external energy, but with the infinite power of consciousness itself. Let me break down something crucial that's going to completely shift your understanding of Egyptian spirituality and how it applies to your awakening right now. You've seen the Egyptian gods, right? Anubis with the jackal head, Horus with the falcon head, Thoth with the ibis head, Sekhmet with the lioness head. And you've probably been told these were primitive people worshipping animal gods because they didn't understand science yet. Wrong. Completely, utterly, fundamentally wrong. These weren't gods in the sense that modern religion teaches gods. These were archetypal forces. These were specific frequencies of consciousness. These were different aspects of the one infinite consciousness that the Egyptians understood operated through different qualities, different energies, different expressions. Anubis, the jackal-headed guide of souls, represents the aspect of consciousness that can navigate between worlds, between dimensions, between life and death. This is the shamanic consciousness, the psychopomp energy that exists within your psyche right now. Dormant in most people, but activatable through specific practices. Horus, the falcon who sees from great heights, represents the enlightened consciousness that can rise above the drama of earthly existence and see the bigger picture, the divine perspective, the truth that lies beyond illusion. This is your higher self, your God consciousness waiting to be activated. Thoth, the ibis-headed master of wisdom and magic, represents the aspect of consciousness that can manipulate reality through knowledge, through words, through symbols, through understanding the hidden laws that govern manifestation. This is your creative power, your ability to speak worlds into existence, to write your reality with a pen of consciousness. Every single one of these gods is actually a part of you, a dormant aspect of your multidimensional consciousness that the Egyptian code teaches you how to awaken, integrate, and become. But here's where it gets even more profound, even more transformative, even more relevant to why this video found you at this exact moment in your life. The Egyptians structured their entire spiritual system around a concept they called the Ka and the Ba. And understanding this is absolutely critical to understanding who you really are and what you're capable of. Your Ka is what we might call your life force, your etheric double, your energy body. It's the subtle template that exists just beyond physical reality. It's what leaves your body during sleep and astral travel. It's what continues after physical death. Your Ba, often depicted as a human-headed bird, is your eternal soul, your true essence, the part of you that has existed since before time began and will exist long after this universe collapses back into the void. Now, modern spiritual teachings often talk about the soul, right? They talk about having a soul, connecting with your soul's soul purpose, soul missions. But the Egyptians understood something far more sophisticated, something that changes everything when you really grasp it. They understood that you're not a body that has a soul. You're a soul that's currently operating a body, temporarily, for the purpose of having specific experiences in this dense, physical dimension. And more than that, they understood that your soul, your Ba, is actually a fractal hologram of the infinite consciousness, meaning you contain within you all the power, all the knowledge, all the creative capacity of the source itself, just temporarily limited by the filters and veils of physical incarnation. The entire purpose of the Egyptian mystery system, the whole point of the initiations, the rituals, the practices they encoded into their civilization, it was all designed to help you remember this truth and then to give you the tools to remove those filters, to dissolve those veils, to activate your full God consciousness while still in human form. And this brings us to perhaps the most important, most powerful, most transformative piece of the Egyptian code. The process they call the weighing of the heart. And when you understand what this really means, not the simplified version they show in museum exhibits, but the deep esoteric meaning, it will revolutionize your entire approach to spiritual awakening. You've probably seen the image, right? The deceased person's heart being weighed against the feather of Maat, goddess of truth. And if the heart is heavier than the feather, it gets devoured by Ammit, the soul-eating demon. But if it's lighter, the soul moves forward into the afterlife. Now, conventional interpretation tells you this is about moral judgment, about being a good person, about following rules and behaving correctly so you don't get punished after death. But that's the exoteric teaching. That's the surface-level interpretation they gave to keep the masses in line, to create a moral framework for society. The esoteric truth, the truth they reserved for true initiates, is something completely different, something that applies not just to death, but to every single moment of your life right now. The heart in Egyptian symbolism represents your emotional body, your accumulated traumas, your unprocessed pain, your stored grief, anger, fear, shame, all the heavy, dense energies you've collected throughout this lifetime and possibly many lifetimes before. The feather of Maat represents truth, represents lightness, represents the natural state of consciousness when it's not weighed down by all these accumulated densities. So the weighing of the heart isn't about some external God judging whether you were good or bad. It's about your own consciousness assessing whether you've done the inner work to process, release, and transmute all the heavy emotional baggage that keeps you trapped in lower frequencies of consciousness. And here's the revolutionary part. This isn't something that only happens after death. This is happening right now, in every moment. determining your level of consciousness, your frequency of vibration, your ability to access higher dimensions of reality. Think about it. Think about how you feel when you're carrying guilt, shame, unresolved anger, deep fear. Your whole body feels heavy, right? Your consciousness feels contracted, limited, stuck in loops of negative thinking. That's your heart being weighed down. That's the accumulated density of unprocessed emotion literally lowering your frequency. Literally keeping you locked in lower dimensions of consciousness where suffering, limitation, and illusion dominate. But when you do the work, when you face your shadows, when you process those emotions, when you forgive yourself and others, when you release the stories and identities you've been clutching, you become lighter. Your consciousness expands, your heart opens, your frequency rises, and suddenly you start accessing states of awareness that were previously impossible for you to reach. This is what the Egyptians meant by the heart being lighter than the feather. This is the state of consciousness where you've cleared enough density that you can actually ascend to higher dimensions. You can actually activate your dormant abilities. You can actually become the god that you've always been but forgot. And the feather of Ma'at, that symbol of truth. Truth is always light. Lies are always heavy. When you're living in alignment with truth, with your authentic self, with divine reality, you feel expansive, free, light, joyful. When you're living in lies, in pretense, in denial, in false identities, you feel heavy, constricted, depressed, anxious. The Egyptian code is teaching you that spiritual awakening isn't about learning new information. It's about releasing what's false. It's about becoming so light, so true, so aligned with your divine nature that you naturally, effortlessly rise into higher consciousness. Now let me tell you about something that's going to blow your mind. Something that connects ancient Egyptian wisdom to what's happening in your consciousness right now. Something that explains why so many people are experiencing spontaneous awakenings, Kundalini activations, dark nights of the soul, and radical shifts in perception in these times. The ancient Egyptians, particularly in the older dynasties, the ones that mainstream history can't quite explain, because their level of sophistication doesn't fit the evolutionary narrative we've been taught. They understood that Earth goes through massive cosmic cycles, great ages where the relationship between Earth and various stellar and galactic forces shifts, creating different conditions for consciousness on the planet. They encoded this knowledge into everything from the alignment of the pyramids with Orion's belt to the precession of the equinoxes that their priests could calculate with stunning accuracy. And what they understood is that there are certain cosmic windows, certain alignments, certain ages where the veils between dimensions become thinner, where the barriers keeping humanity locked in limited consciousness become more permeable, where mass awakening becomes not just possible but inevitable. We are living in one of those windows right now. This isn't New Age fantasy. This isn't wishful thinking. This is observable, measurable reality that ancient wisdom and modern science both point toward. The Earth is moving through a region of space with different energetic properties. Our solar system is entering a new phase of its galactic journey. The electromagnetic field of the planet is fluctuating in unprecedented ways. And all of this is creating the perfect conditions for what the Egyptians would have called the return of the gods. But they didn't mean gods coming from the sky. They meant the God consciousness within humanity awakening, remembering, rising back to its natural state. And this is why the Egyptian code has found you specifically right now. Because you're one of the ones who came here for this. You're one of the souls who volunteered to incarnate during this cosmic window, to participate in this mass awakening, to remember your true nature and help anchor that frequency on Earth for others who are still sleeping. You probably feel it, don't you? That sense that you're here for something more, something bigger, something beyond the mundane reality that society wants you to accept as the entirety of existence? That's not ego. That's not delusion. That's not spiritual bypassing. That's your BA, your eternal soul, your God consciousness trying to get your attention, trying to wake you up, trying to remind you of agreements you made before you incarnated into this body, this life, this time, and the Egyptian code, this ancient wisdom that's been preserved and protected and passed down through countless generations of initiates, through mystery schools, through esoteric lineages, through symbolic systems that hide in plain sight. It's activating in collective consciousness right now because it's needed right now, because this is the time it was always meant to be revealed, because you are ready to receive it and use it for your awakening and the awakening of others. So let's go deeper into the practical application of this. Let's talk about what the Egyptian code reveals about the structure of consciousness and how you can use this knowledge to accelerate your own awakening. The Egyptians understood consciousness as operating through multiple levels, multiple dimensions, multiple bodies, and they had specific names and symbols for each level. At the most basic level, you have your physical body, your cot, your flesh and bones. This is the densest, slowest vibration, the vehicle you use to navigate three-dimensional reality. But the Egyptians never made the mistake of thinking this was all of you, of reducing your identity to this temporary meat suit. Above that, you have your Ka, your etheric double, your life force body. This is what acupuncture works with. This is what you're actually perceiving when you see auras. This is what leaves during astral projection and near-death experiences. Then you have your BA, your soul, your true eternal essence. This is what reincarnates, what carries your essential nature across lifetimes, what connects to higher dimensions even while you're in physical form. And then, rarely discussed even in Egyptian studies, but absolutely crucial to the complete picture. You have your AKH, your light body, your glorified spirit, the fully awakened, fully enlightened, fully God-realized aspect of consciousness that most humans never activate during incarnation. The AKH is what the resurrection mythology in various traditions is really pointing to. Not some physical body coming back to life, but consciousness reaching such a high level of activation that it becomes light itself, pure radiant awareness that can create, transform, and transcend all limitation. The entire Egyptian spiritual system, all the practices, all the initiations, all the secret teachings passed down in the temples, it was all designed to help you move your identity and your operational consciousness up through these levels. From identifying solely with your physical body to identifying with your etheric body, then your soul body, and ultimately your light body, your AKH, your fully awakened God consciousness. And here's what's absolutely revolutionary about understanding the structure. Most spiritual teachings today focus on transcending the body, escaping physical reality, getting out of the material world because it's viewed as a prison or an illusion or something to be escaped from. But the Egyptian code teaches something far more sophisticated, far more empowering, far more aligned with what's actually possible for awakened consciousness. The goal isn't to leave the physical body and physical reality. The goal is to bring your higher consciousness, your BA, and ultimately your AKH, fully into your physical form, to embody your God consciousness while still operating in three-dimensional reality, to become what they call the SCH, a spiritual body, a divine human, a walking God in flesh. This is what the pharaohs who were true initiates achieved. This is what the high priests and priestesses worked toward. This is what the mystery schools were really teaching. Not how to escape the body, but how to divinize the body. How to make your physical form a temple for God consciousness. How to walk Earth as an immortal being while still appearing to be human. And before you think this is impossible, before you dismiss this as mythology or fantasy or something reserved for special people in ancient times, let me tell you something. The only difference between those who achieve this level of consciousness and those who don't is not talent, not genetics, not divine favor, not being chosen by some external god. The only difference is knowledge and application of that knowledge. The Egyptian code is the knowledge, the map, the instruction manual. Your willingness to apply it, to do the practices, to go through the initiations that life presents you with, to face your darkness and integrate your light, that's the application. Every single human being carries within them the capacity to activate their God consciousness, to embody their light body, to become a living bridge between heaven and earth, between infinite consciousness and finite form. The only question is, will you do what it takes to remember this truth and live it? Now, let's talk about one of the most suppressed, most forbidden, most revolutionary aspects of the Egyptian code. Their understanding of death and what they call the DUAT, the underworld, the realm of the dead. And when you understand what this really means, your entire relationship with death, with fear, with the purpose of physical incarnation shifts permanently. You've been taught to fear death, right? To see it as the end, as loss, as something to avoid at all costs, as the ultimate tragedy. But the Egyptians who had access to the inner teachings, the true mysteries, they didn't fear death at all. They prepared for it the way you might prepare for a journey to a foreign country, by learning the language, understanding the customs, knowing the territory. Because they understood that death isn't the end of consciousness, it's a transition, it's a doorway, it's a shift from one state of being to another, and depending on your level of consciousness, your level of preparation, your level of awakening, that transition can be smooth, clear, enlightening, or it can be confusing, frightening, disorienting. The Book of the Dead, which is actually mistranslated and should be called the Book of Coming Forth by Day, is essentially a guidebook for navigating consciousness after the physical body dies. But here's what they don't tell you. It's also a guidebook for navigating consciousness while you're still alive, because the DUAT, the underworld, the realm of the dead, it's not some external place you go after death. It's a dimension of consciousness. It's the unconscious realm. It's the shadow, territories of your psyche. It's all the parts of yourself you've denied, repressed, refused to look at, pushed into darkness. Every night when you go to sleep, every time you dream, every time you have a mystical experience or a shamanic journey or a psychedelic experience, you're entering the DUAT. You're navigating the underworld. You're moving through the same territories that consciousness moves through after death. And the Egyptian code teaches you how to navigate these realms consciously, how to move through them with awareness rather than being swept along unconsciously, how to face the demons and monsters and challenges that appear there with courage and wisdom. Because here's the secret. All those demons, all those monsters, all those challenges in the DUAT, they're not external entities attacking you. They're aspects of your own consciousness that you haven't integrated yet. They're your traumas, your fears, your denied shadows, your unprocessed pain taking symbolic form. When you learn to navigate the DUAT consciously, when you learn to face these aspects of yourself without running away, when you learn to integrate them rather than fight them, you become whole, you become powerful, you become awake in a way that most humans never achieve. This is what the initiations in the Egyptian mystery schools were really about. They were controlled encounters with your own darkness, guided experiences of ego death and rebirth, structured opportunities to face the DUAT while still alive, so that when actual physical death comes, you've already mastered the territory. You already know the way. You've already become so conscious that death becomes just another doorway, another transition, another adventure rather than something to fear. And this brings us to one of the most famous Egyptian concepts, one that's been completely misunderstood by conventional interpretation. The concept of the true name, the secret name, the name of power. You see it in the mythology, right? The story of Isis tricking Ra into revealing his true name, so she could gain his power. The idea that knowing someone's true name gives you power over them. But what does this really mean at the esoteric level? Your true name isn't the label your parents gave you at birth. It's not what's on your birth certificate. Your true name is your vibration, your unique frequency signature, the specific harmonic that your soul resonates at, the sound of your consciousness when it's fully aligned with its divine nature. When you know your own true name, when you can sound your own true frequency, when you can vibrate at the resonance of your highest self, you come into your full power, you activate your full potential, you become who you really are rather than who you've been conditioned to be. This is why in many ancient traditions, initiates were given new names upon completing certain levels of training. Not as honorary titles, but as vibrational keys, as sound formulas that help them embody new levels of consciousness, new identities, new frequencies of being. The Egyptian code teaches you to find your true name, to discover your authentic vibration, to sound the note of your soul so clearly that all false identities, all conditioning, all limitation falls away, and what remains is pure divine essence expressing uniquely as you. Let's talk about the eyes, because the symbolism of eyes in Egyptian mystery teaching contains keys to perception, to consciousness, to what you're actually capable of seeing when you develop your full perceptual abilities. You've seen the Eye of Horus, right? That iconic symbol, also called the Wadjet or the Ujjat Eye. With its distinctive markings, its falcon-like appearance, its mathematical precision. And you've probably seen the Eye of Ra, similar but different, representing different aspects of solar consciousness. Now, conventional interpretation tells you these are protective symbols, amulets against evil, representations of the sun and moon, and again, that's the exoteric version, that's the surface teaching. The esoteric truth is far more profound, far more practical, far more relevant to your awakening right now. The Eye of Horus represents your inner vision, your third eye, your ability to perceive beyond the physical senses, to see into other dimensions, to access intuitive knowledge, to view reality with spiritual sight. Each part of the Eye of Horus symbol corresponds to one of the senses, to one of the aspects of perception. And when all parts are functioning and integrated, you have complete perception. You can see reality as it truly is rather than as your conditioned mind interprets it to be. But here's what's absolutely revolutionary. The Eye of Horus isn't just a symbol of perception, it's actually a mathematical formula. It's a fractional system where each part of the eye represents a specific fraction. 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, 1/64. And when you add all these fractions together, you get 63/64, which means 1/64 is missing. And that missing piece, that gap, that empty space, that represents the divine component, that represents the part that can only be filled by consciousness itself, by the presence of the observer, by you bringing awareness to your perception. The Egyptians were encoding into their symbols the fundamental principle that observation affects reality, that consciousness is not separate from what it perceives, that there's always a gap between objective reality and subjective experience that can only be bridged by conscious awareness. This is quantum mechanics. This is the observer effect. This is the fundamental nature of consciousness-created reality, encoded thousands of years ago in Egyptian symbolism, waiting for those with eyes to see, which brings us full circle, developing the eyes to see is the work, Opening your inner vision is the practice. Activating your spiritual perception is what the Egyptian code is teaching you to do. And when you do open that inner vision, when you do activate your third eye, your eye of Horus, your spiritual sight, what you begin to see is that the physical world, the material reality you've been taught is the only reality, is actually the smallest part of what exists. It's the densest, slowest, most limited dimension of a vast multidimensional cosmos that's pulsing with life, with intelligence, with consciousness at every level. You begin to see the etheric realm, the layer just beyond physical, where thoughts and emotions take visible form, where energy flows and accumulates and creates patterns that later manifest physically. You begin to see the astral realm, where dreams and imagination are the substance of reality, where consciousness can travel instantly, where the laws of physics don't apply the same way. You begin to see the causal realm, where the causes behind effects are visible, where you can trace every manifestation back to its origin in consciousness, where you understand the deeper patterns, the karmic threads, the soul agreements that shape your experiences. And if you go far enough, if you open wide enough, if you develop your sight to the highest levels, you begin to see what the Egyptians called the netter, the divine realm, the frequency where the gods dwell, which is really the realm of pure archetypal consciousness, pure creative potential, pure unmanifest possibility before it takes form. This is what it means to have your eyes opened. This is what the serpent's symbolism represents. Not evil, but kundalini, but awakening, but the rising of consciousness up through the chakras to open the third eye. This is what happens when you activate the Egyptian code within your consciousness. Let me share with you something about the Egyptian symbol of the yen cage, that cross with a loop at the top, that you see everywhere in Egyptian art, held by every god, every pharaoh, every initiate. Because understanding what this symbol really represents will give you a key to unlocking profound transformation in your consciousness right now. The conventional interpretation tells you it represents life, eternal life, the key of life. And that's true as far as it goes, but it's the kindergarten version of the truth. The deeper meaning, the esoteric interpretation that initiates understood, is that the Ankh represents the union of opposites, the integration of polarities, the marriage of masculine and feminine, of spirit and matter, of consciousness and form, of infinite and finite. The vertical line represents the masculine principle, the penetrating force of consciousness, the active creative power. The horizontal line represents the feminine principle, the receptive womb of matter, the nurturing ground of manifestation. And the loop at the top, that circle, represents what happens when these two forces unite perfectly. It creates a portal, a gateway, a womb of creation through which new reality can be born. When you learn to hold both masculine and feminine energies in perfect balance within your own consciousness, when you learn to unite your spiritual nature with your physical nature, when you learn to bring infinite consciousness into finite form, you become an Ankh, you become a living key, you become a walking portal through which higher dimensions can manifest into physical reality. This is what it means to be a divine human. This is what the Egyptian code is teaching you to become. And this applies to everything in your spiritual development, to every challenge you face, to every growth edge you encounter. The pain you're experiencing, it's asking you to integrate it rather than resist it, to bring consciousness to it rather than push it away. The fear that grips you sometimes, it's showing you where you've forgotten your divine nature, where you've identified with the limited self rather than the infinite self. The challenges in your relationships, your work, your life circumstances, they're all initiations. They're all opportunities for you to practice holding the tension of opposites, for you to integrate polarities, for you to become the Ankh, rather than just carrying one as a symbol. The Egyptians didn't create symbols as decoration or as religious iconography. They created symbols as tools, as technologies of consciousness, as ways to encode complex multidimensional truths into forms that could be contemplated, meditated on, integrated into consciousness. When you wear an ankh, when you meditate on the ankh, when you understand the ankh, you're not just honoring ancient Egypt, you're activating a specific frequency in your consciousness. You're aligning yourself with the principle of sacred union. You're becoming a vessel for the marriage of heaven and earth in your own being. Now I want to talk about something that might be the most practical, most immediate, most applicable piece of the Egyptian code for your life right now. Their understanding of sound, of vibration, of what they called hek, which translates roughly as magic, but really means the creative power of consciousness expressed through words, sounds, and symbols. The Egyptians understood something that quantum physics is now confirming. Reality is fundamentally vibrational. Everything is frequency. Everything is resonance. Everything is sound patterns creating standing waves in the field of consciousness that we perceive as solid matter. And they understood that human consciousness, particularly when it operates through sound, through voice, through intentional vibration, has the power to shape reality, to influence matter, to create changes in the physical world that seem miraculous to those who don't understand the mechanics of consciousness. This is why the Egyptian priests and priestesses were trained in specific vocalizations, specific chants, specific sound formulas. Not because they were superstitious primitives making noise to imaginary gods, but because they understood the science of consciousness. They understood how specific frequencies align with specific aspects of reality, how certain sound patterns can activate dormant DNA, can shift brain states, can influence energy fields, can literally restructure matter at the atomic level. You've probably heard the story of how the pyramids were built, right? The official narrative about slaves and ramps and brute force? But there's another tradition, another explanation that's been preserved in esoteric teachings, in oral traditions, in the memories of initiates, that the massive stones were moved through sound, through levitation achieved by specific vibrational frequencies, by trained priests who knew exactly how to vibrate consciousness in a way that temporarily altered the relationship between matter and gravity. Now, whether that specific story is literally true or metaphorically true, here's what's undeniably true. Sound and vibration have power, measurable, demonstrable, scientifically verifiable power to affect matter, to affect consciousness, to affect reality. When you speak, when you sing, when you chant, when you vocalize with intention, with consciousness, with alignment to truth, you're not just making noise, you're creating reality. You're sending ripples through the quantum field. You're influencing the probability waves that collapse into the experiences you have. This is what the Egyptians called hek. This is what other traditions call spell work or prayer or affirmation or mantra. It's all the same fundamental understanding that consciousness expressed through sound has creative power. Now, I know we're going deep here. I know this is a lot to take in, and you might be wondering, okay, but how do I actually apply this? How do I take ancient Egyptian wisdom and use it for my awakening right now, in my modern life, with my specific challenges and circumstances? So let me give you the practical synthesis, the direct application, the actual practices that the Egyptian code points you toward. First, you have to understand that spiritual awakening is not a single event. It's not a moment of enlightenment where everything suddenly changes and then you're done. It's an ongoing process. It's a series of deaths and rebirths. It's a spiral path where you keep encountering the same lessons at deeper and deeper levels until you finally integrate them completely. The Egyptians structured this as initiations. as passages through specific thresholds of consciousness. And they knew that each initiation requires three things: preparation, ordeal, and integration. The preparation phase is where you gather knowledge, where you develop practices, where you strengthen your consciousness for what's coming. The ordeal phase is where you're tested, where you face your shadows, where your false identity gets stripped away, where you die to an old version of yourself. And the integration phase is where you digest the experience, where you embody the new level of consciousness, where you stabilize at the new frequency before the next initiation begins. Right now, in your life, you're always in one of these three phases with something, with some aspect of your growth, some area of your consciousness, some part of your awakening. Maybe you're in preparation, feeling the call towards something new, gathering knowledge, finding teachers, reading books like this, sensing that change is coming. So here we are, at the end of this journey, but really, it's just the beginning of yours. The Egyptian code didn't find you by accident. Remember that. You were called here, drawn here by something deeper than curiosity, something ancient in your soul that knows this truth, that remembers this wisdom, that's been waiting for you to be ready to hear it. Everything I've shared with you today, about consciousness, about the multidimensional nature of your being, about the God power sleeping within you, it's not new information, it's remembering. Your soul already knows all of this. I'm just here to remind you, to activate what's already dormant within you, to give you permission to step into the fullness of who you've always been. The question now is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you let it fade back into the noise of everyday life? Or will you take the first step on the path of true awakening? The Egyptian code is waiting for you. The mystery schools of consciousness are always open to those who are ready, and the gods, the aspects of divine consciousness, are waiting for you to remember that you're one of them. If this resonated with you, if something in your soul said yes while you were watching, then do me a favor. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about your own awakening journey. And subscribe, because we're going much deeper into these mysteries in the videos to come. Until next time, remember who you are, remember why you came here, and remember, you didn't find this found you.